Imagine walking through Europe 45,000 years ago. Around the next valley, you might not meet another Homo sapiens. You could encounter an entirely different kind of human. They made tools, controlled fire, buried their dead, and cared for injured family members. They looked different, sounded different, and had evolved along separate paths for hundreds of thousands of years. Yet today, every one of those human species is gone. The greatest mystery isn't why they disappeared, it's why we didn't. If you picture human evolution as a straight line leading from ape to modern human, erase that image immediately. It never happened that way. For millions of years, human evolution looked more like a branching tree than a ladder. New species emerged while others continued living alongside them. Around 300,000 years ago, our own species, Homo sapiens, appeared in Africa. But we were far from alone. Neanderthals occupied Europe and Western Asia. Denisovans lived somewhere across Asia, though much of what we know comes from a handful of fossils and ancient DNA. Homo floresiensis, often nicknamed the Hobbit, survived on the Indonesian island of Flores. Homo lusonensis inhabited what is now the Philippines. Earlier species, such as Homo erectus, persisted in parts of Asia far longer than scientists once believed. Imagine standing in one place on Earth where several different human species existed within a few thousand kilometers of one another. That wasn't science fiction, it was reality. For most of human history, being the only human species on the planet would have seemed unusual. So if several human species coexisted, did they know each other existed? The answer is almost certainly yes. Modern dating techniques show that Homo sapiens overlapped with Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia for thousands of years. These populations occupied many of the same landscapes, hunted similar animals, and sometimes even used nearby caves at different times. The strongest proof comes from your own DNA. If your ancestry traces primarily outside Africa, roughly 1 to 2% of your genome usually comes from Neanderthals. Some populations in Asia and Oceania also carry inherited Denisovan DNA. These genetic traces could only exist because different human species met, formed relationships, and had children together. This completely changes the old story. Our ancestors didn't simply replace every other human species the moment they arrived. In some places, they became family. Ancient humans were capable of recognizing one another as more than rivals. Despite hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution, they remained closely related enough to produce fertile offspring whose descendants are still alive today. The extinction story, it turns out, wasn't as simple as one species defeating another. It was far more complicated. Now here's where the mystery deepens. If humans could live together and even have children together, why did every other human species eventually disappear? Scientists have debated this question for decades because no single explanation fits every region or every species. Climate almost certainly played a role. During the last ice age, temperatures shifted dramatically over relatively short periods. Forests became grasslands. Grasslands became frozen tundra. Entire ecosystems expanded and collapsed as glaciers advanced and retreated. Populations already living near the limits of survival suddenly faced shrinking food supplies and rapidly changing environments. Small populations are especially vulnerable during times like these. A few harsh winters, declining birth rates, disease, or the loss of key hunting territories can push a species toward extinction surprisingly quickly. But climate alone cannot explain everything. After all, Homo sapiens survived those same environmental upheavals. So what allowed our ancestors to endure while every other branch of the human family gradually vanished? The answer may lie not in stronger bodies or bigger brains, but in something far less obvious. Something that transformed scattered bands of individuals into the most adaptable species the planet had ever seen. The advantage that separated Homo sapiens may not have been intelligence alone. Neanderthals had brains at least as large as ours on average. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire, hunted enormous animals, and cared for injured members of their communities for years. Some evidence even suggests they created symbolic objects and buried their dead. So if they were so capable, what was different? Many researchers believe the answer was the size and complexity of social networks. Imagine two groups facing the same harsh winter. One consists of 30 closely connected individuals. The other belongs to a much larger web of communities spread across hundreds of kilometers. If one camp loses its hunters or suffers a food shortage, neighboring groups can exchange resources, share knowledge, or welcome newcomers. Larger social networks act like insurance. Ideas spread faster. New tool designs travel farther. Genetic diversity remains healthier because people meet partners from more distant groups. Over thousands of years, even a small advantage like this could dramatically increase the odds of survival. 5. Another possibility lies in innovation. Archaeological evidence suggests that Homo Homo sapiens gradually developed increasingly diverse technologies. Stone blades became more specialized. Bone, antler, and ivory were shaped into needles, fishhooks, spear points, and decorative objects. Evidence for long-distance trade appears in shells, pigments, and stone transported hundreds of kilometers from their original sources. These discoveries reveal something important. Knowledge was moving. When one community invented a better hunting technique or tool, the idea didn't necessarily stay in one valley. Through trade, migration, and social connections, useful innovations could spread across enormous regions. Now imagine a competing human species living in smaller, more isolated populations. An invention lost with one generation might disappear forever. For Homo sapiens, the same discovery could survive because dozens of distant communities had already adopted it. Culture itself became a survival technology. There's another chapter of this story that often surprises people. Extinction doesn't always mean complete disappearance. When scientists first extracted DNA from Neanderthal fossils, they expected to find a completely separate branch of humanity with no modern descendants. Instead, they found us. Millions of people alive today still carry inherited Neanderthal genes. Some populations also possess Denisovan DNA, associated with traits such as adaptation to high-altitude environments in Tibet or aspects of immune function inherited from ancient ancestors. That means part of those human species never truly vanished. They were absorbed. Their genetic legacy survives inside modern humans, quietly influencing traits thousands of generations after the last Neanderthal disappeared as a distinct population. But not every ancient human lineage left descendants. Some vanished without leaving identifiable genetic traces. And in the final part of this story, we'll reach the question that still fascinates scientists today. Was Homo sapiens simply luckier than every other human species? Or did we fundamentally change the rules of survival itself? So was it war? It's one of the most popular theories in movies and novels. The idea imagines Homo sapiens sweeping across the world, defeating every other human species in a series of brutal conflicts. The truth is far less certain. There is evidence that different human species occasionally competed for the same hunting grounds, caves, water sources, and migration routes. In regions where food became scarce, competition almost certainly intensified. But archaeologists have found no convincing evidence for a continent-wide campaign of extermination. History is rarely that simple. More likely, several pressures acted together. Climate shifts reduced suitable habitats, small populations became vulnerable to disease and inbreeding. Competition for resources increased. Some groups interbred with Homo sapiens until they gradually lost their separate identity. Others simply became too few to recover after environmental setbacks. Extinction wasn't necessarily a single catastrophic event. For many human species, it was probably a slow fading away. Here's the irony. The very qualities that helped Homo sapiens survive may have made us unique among all human species. We built larger social networks than any of our relatives. We shared ideas across vast distances. We adapted our tools to deserts, forests, mountains, coastlines, and frozen plains. We created symbols, stories, and traditions that allowed knowledge to survive long after the people who discovered it had died. Instead of relying only on biological evolution, we increasingly relied on cultural evolution. Every generation began where the previous one had left off. Knowledge accumulated instead of starting over. That simple difference may have become one of the greatest survival advantages any species has ever possessed. So why are we the only human species left? Because evolution never promises that the strongest, smartest, or toughest species will survive forever. It favors the one that adapts best to changing conditions. Homo sapiens happen to combine flexible thinking, cooperation, communication, innovation, and wide social connections at exactly the right time in Earth's history. Our relatives possessed many of those same abilities, but they often existed in smaller populations facing greater environmental pressures. Some became part of us through interbreeding. Others quietly disappeared as their numbers dwindled. Yet they were never failures. Neanderthals survived for hundreds of thousands of years through repeated ice ages. Homo erectus endured for well over 1 million years, making it one of the most successful human species ever to exist. Denisovans adapted to environments stretching from Siberia to Southeast Asia. Each branch of the human family solved survival in its own remarkable way. The next time you look in a mirror, remember something extraordinary. You are not simply looking at the last human species. You're looking at the final surviving branch of an ancient family tree that once stretched across 3 continents. Hidden within your DNA are echoes of relatives who walked this planet long before recorded history, whose voices are forever silent, yet whose legacy still lives inside every modern human. In a very real sense, humanity didn't completely outlive the others. It carries pieces of them wherever it goes.